here. So here's what we're going to do today. We're going to start. We again have some concurrences or motions not to concur from our three analysts. Let's get that out of the way first. Stacy, I think you have maybe the most of the three. So why don't we start with you?
I do.
With what you got, and then we'll take each, and then we'll get back to these lists. Okay.
We'll start with Senate Bill 180. This is the bronchodilator bill that this committee just passed, I think this week or last week. I can't remember anymore. The House amendments to Senate Bill 180 conform the two bills, so the recommendation is to concur.
Okay, recommendation. We have a motion to concur from Senator Augustine, a second from Vice Chair Kagan. And again, the bill number, Stacy, is 180.
Senate Bill 180.
Senate Bill 180. Okay, any questions for Stacy on the motion to concur? Okay, all in favor of the motion to concur, raise your hand. All opposed, motion carries. Stacy, what's next?
Senate Bill 271, election law revisions. This is a cross-file to House Bill 14, which this committee just voted this week, and Senator Kagan decided they liked the Senate amendments better. So the recommendation would be to not concur and appoint a conference committee.
Is there a motion not to concur here on the table? Okay, motion from Vice Chair Kagan, second from Senator Augustine. All in favor of the motion to not concur and move to a conference committee, raise your hand. All opposed, that motion carries. Stacy?
Senate Bill 540. This is a cross-file to House Bill 472. This was the school mapping data bill. The House amendments conform it to HB 472 as passed by the Senate. The recommendation is to concur with the House amendments.
Okay, so they've done what we did.
Mm-hmm.
Correct. So they've backed off. So the motion to concur would be appropriate here. Is there a motion? Vice Chair Kagan, Senator Augustine, second. All in favor of the motion to concur, raise your hand. All opposed, motion carried. Stacy?
Senate Bill 738. This is the cross-file to House Bill 785, which is freedom to read. The House amendments conform it to HB 785 as passed by the Senate. So the recommendation is to concur.
So this is the Senate bill essentially that we already passed, and we have a motion to concur from Senator Washington, a second from Senator Kagan. All in favor of the motion to concur, raise your hand. All opposed, the motion carries. Stacy?
Senate Bill 794.
Well,
sorry.
Sending vote on the motion to concur. Okay, it was not unanimous.
It's not recorded, so
this is not a recorded. This is be voice. Correct. Yes. Motion carries. Okay, back to you, Stacy.
Senate Bill 797. This is the Special Education Attorneys Fund. It conforms it to HB 903 as passed by the Senate. So the recommendation is to concur in the House amendments.
Okay, is there a motion to concur from Senator Hester, second Vice Chair Kagan? All in favor? The motion to concur, raise your hand. All opposed, motion carries. Stacy?
Two more. Senate Bill 882, the Growing Family Child Care Opportunities Pilot Program. The House amendments conform it to HB 1139 as passed by the Senate. The recommendation is to concur in the House amendments.
Is there a motion to concur? Senator Brooks, favorable. Senator Washington, second. All in favor of the motion to concur, raise your hand. All opposed, motion carries. Last one, Stacy.
The last one is Senate Bill 1091, Education Blind and Visually Impaired Students Textbook Equity. The House added some amendments that I haven't been able to figure out yet, but they definitely do not conform to the version passed by the House. So the recommendation is to not concur and appoint a conference committee.
Okay, is there a motion to not concur and go conference committee on this one? We got Senator Brooks favorable, Washington second. All in favor of the motion to not concur, raise your hand. All opposed, that motion to not concur carries.
That's all for me.
That's it. Dara, you're up next. You've got, I think, two. Okay.
So first of all, is Senate Bill 547, which is the cross-file of House Bill 379, which the committee passed this week. The House amendments would conform the two bills. The recommendation is to concur. This is the Traveling Animal Acts bill.
Okay, do we have a motion to concur from Senator Brooks, a second from Senator Lewis Young? All in favor of the motion to concur, raise your hand. All opposed, motion carries. Second and last one, Darren.
Senate Bill 835, Environment Delegated Authorities, Well and Septic Program Permits. This is a bill which would require a local health department or county government to submit a schedule of review times for well and septic program permits to the department. The House amendments would remove a study required by the Department of the Environment, which this committee had added. As according to the Department of the Environment, the department already has conducted this study and that there is already do-it money going towards the program. The recommendation would be to concur.
We've got a motion to concur from somebody. Who's Senator Hester moves to concur. Second from Senator Augustine. All in favor of the motion to concur, raise your hand. All opposed, motion carries. Is that it, Dara?
That's it.
Okay, we're gonna go to Alexis.
I have three. So first is Senate Bill 474, Certificate of Public Convenience and Necessity and Related Approvals, Definition of Generating Station. As you all recall, I'm sure, this is the bill related to backup generation from or exemption for backup generators from CPC and approval. In the House, the bill was amended to require a 15% distribution from remaining corporate income tax revenue from data centers that are in effect on or after January 1st, 2026. This distribution will go directly into the Strategic Energy Investment Fund. The recommendation on this one is to concur.
Okay, Senator Lewis Young moves to concur. A second from Senator Brooks. Discussion? Questions? Okay, all in favor of the motion to concur, raise your hand. All opposed, the motion carries. Alexis?
All right, Senate Bill 307, which is a sunset bill pertaining to the State Board of Boiler Rules. This bill was a little different in that it modified the membership of the board as well from 9 to 10. The House maintained the modification of the board, but it repealed the sunset and required a report beginning on July 1st, 2025 and every 4 years. The recommendation is to not concur. You can go to conference to align this with the other bills we're passing.
Okay, so the motion to not concur, is there a motion from Senator Brooks? Move not to concur, second from Senator Hester. All in favor of the motion to not concur and go to conference, raise your hand. All opposed, that motion carries. And then finally, Alexis.
Senate Bill 333, Housing and Community Development, Affordable Housing, Identifying Suitable Property. We moved the Senate bill or the House bill, pardon me, yesterday. And the House amendments to this Senate bill make a conforming change, which would align the two postures together as we passed the House bill yesterday. So the recommendation on this is to move to concur.
Is there a motion from Senator Brooks moves to concur, Senator Washington second. All in favor, motion to concur, raise your hand. All opposed, that motion carries. Okay, next, let's move to our various lists. Let's start, we have a consent list, number 50, short list with some House bills that are essentially the same as the Senate bills we've already passed. Number 50, you'll see there's just 3 bills on the list. Let's take a look at them. We've already passed the Senate bills, I think in exactly the same form. And so, yeah. But number 50, there's just, it's a consent list because the bills are basically just the House bills of Senate bills. Okay, favorable from Senator Kagan. Is there a second from Senator Augustine? Okay, all in favor of this consent list of 3 House bills, raise your hand. All opposed. Okay, those bills now carry on. Next, let's go to, we've got some Senate bills on lists 49 and 51. Let's try to knock those out. We've got a bill from Senator Brooks, 543. One from Senator Jackson, and then on the other list, Senator Mouth, Senate Bill 1173. So let's focus on these 2 lists that are just 3 Senate bills. And we're going to start with you, Stacy, on Senate Bill 543.
So this also has a cross file to it, so we could,
Yeah,
so you can.
correct. So when
Okay.
we take up this, we'll take up the cross file, I think, from Delegate Jazz Lewis.
Okay. Senate Bill 543, Institutions of Higher Education, Admission Standards, Prohibition on Consideration of Legacy Preference. This bill prohibits an institution of higher education that receives state funds from considering a legacy preference as an eligible criterion for admission standards at the institutions. The preference given to an applicant due to having a familial relationship to an alum of the institution. However, an institution may ask applicants to provide information about familiar relationships to alums of the institution for the purpose of collecting data. There is one amendment that is on page 2 of your packet for list 49. And this amendment essentially conforms the bill to HB 4 as passed by the House, and it adds a prohibition on considering donor preferences.
Okay. So we've got 5, I apologize, there was one amendment. Okay,
Correct.
and
Offered by Senator Brooks, yes.
Senator Brooks. Senator
Mhm.
Brooks, before we take questions, any, you want to add anything to the about the amendment?
Yeah. And all the amendment does, it removes donor preferences and removes donor preferences and insert legacy preferences there. So, say that again.
So it conforms it to the House and it adds donor preferences to legacy preferences. So the bill would prohibit both consideration of a legacy preference or a donor preference by the institution of higher education as eligible criterion for admission standards at the institution.
Okay, and we're going to take some questions on just on the amendment. Let's start with,
Can we move the amendment?
yeah, let's to get the conversation going. Senator Augustine, would you want to move the amendment and then we can second with Senator Brooks?
Okay.
Okay, now we have the amendment in front of us, the one amendment from Senator Brooks, Senator Carozza, and we'll just take questions.
I'm just going back for more or less the refresher on this because we've had some discussions on different bills about admission standards. So I'm trying to better understand exactly what this either prohibits or allows.
So an institution of higher education, when viewing criterion for admission to the institution, they can look at an application, but they can't use that when saying as a criterion for entry. You can't say, okay, I'm giving you an additional bump because you have a family member who went to this institution, or you can't get a bump for saying my family donated a building. So they have to consider other criterion when looking to admit you to that institution. Afterward, if they're collecting data about whether the people applying to the institution had a family member attend there, they can look at that information and consider it at that time, but not as criteria for entrance.
Okay, so let's say you have a family of 4, a family of 6. The parents went to the school and it looks like all the children qualified to go to the school. You're saying that when you get to that 4th one, and if they were to put on there, my folks went here, all my siblings went here, that is not a criteria for admission, but it's a criteria for financial aid, or what I guess that's what I'm trying to
Right,
understand
so-
how the information can and cannot be used.
So the admissions officers will tell you they have a list, like of say 19 different things that they look at when they're considering applicants to be admitted to an institution. On that 19 things, it can't include, I had a family member who went here, you can't get an extra point for that. You can't have my donated a building, or I spent $50,000 a year to your institution. You can't consider, or the institution can't consider that. But later on, for example, some institutions do have scholarships and whatnot. So they can use that information to give a scholarship later on. If, for example, your family went there, or I don't know, they have a donor preference scholarship. Never heard of that, but just in case. So
But no, that I appreciate that explanation. So the bottom line would be, by passing this legislation that prohibits the legacy preference for admission, it would open up more opportunities for qualified students for entrance is, I'm
In
just-
theory, apparently none of
Yes.
our public institutions actually have this as a consideration. So yes.
And this applies to all of our, this applies to public and
Yes.
private?
Yes.
So have we passed legislation before on that dictates a criteria for private institutions as well? I just want to know if this is a new precedent on the application, if we're kind of providing some mandates here on their review and admissions process for the first time on private institutions of higher education.
I am not familiar with any. But you know, federal law, for example, now prohibits the consideration of race or other certain categories in that criteria.
So I see in our testimony, there was just information provided by the Independent College and University Association.
Yes.
Senator Cruz, while you're pondering, there are some other Senator Augustine wanted to weigh in here.
I did. It just like point of clarification, a few points of clarification. One, the University of Maryland system does not use legacy in their admissions. They already removed that. Johns Hopkins doesn't use legacy in their admissions. My understanding is that at this point, there are a small number, 2 or 3 of the independents that do. Although my understanding is that the Independent Association, MICUA, is okay with this at this point, in part because of what Stacy mentioned, which is that what is allowed in the bill is that you can't use it for admission, but if you've had donors who have created a scholarship fund for legacy kids, that still can be there, which is like a recruiting tool. Like we understand these schools are trying to recruit people and stuff like that. So that still is there and is still something that's available for these folks. But the idea here is that the legacy in and of itself is not an indicator. It is not an indicator of individuals' academic qualifications or the breadth of the things that they may or may have not done. It's simply that their family member before them had gone there. And so the idea with this, taking this off the list as a part of the criteria, is that it will even the playing field a little bit for those who were not there before. And I support this bill. Thank you.
Okay, Senator Washington.
To the broader question of the state of Maryland setting policy for private universities, MHEC does, the MHEC board and MHEC does establish statewide policies, and we do that through MHEC for both public and private universities. So it's not as well as for profit. So just generally, it's there.
Go back to Senator Carozza.
Appreciate the back and forth, because if it is a new policy, but I did see the letter of information from the Maryland Independent College and University Association, and they're saying that they don't utilize legacy preferences as criterion for admission. So therefore, I understand that they are okay with the bill. So, but I just did want to understand how it would affect public, private, and what they've already been doing or not doing. So thank you.
Okay, we had a motion favorable and a second on the amendment. We had one amendment from Senator Brooks. Can you just discussion about the amendment? Okay, all in favor of the amendment, not the bill, on the amendment, raise your hand. All opposed, that single amendment carries. We now have Senate Bill 543 as amended, which Stacy is in the same posture as Delegate Lewis's Jazz Lewis HB4. They're the same.
Correct.
So this, we're going to take a vote, but it'll count for both bills. Okay, and we'll do a roll call. Just want to make sure everybody is properly recorded. So is there a motion favorable on the bill as amended? Senator Augustine, favorable on the bill as amended, plus the HB4 Lewis bill. Is there a second from Senator Brooks? Okay, let's do a roll call.
All right, Senator Kagan,
Aye.
Senator Kagan, yes. Senator Augustine,
Yes.
Senator Augustine, yes. Senator Gallion, Senator Gallion, yes. Senator Watson, Senator Watson, no. Senator Lewis Young, Senator Lewis Young, yes. Senator Brooks,
Yes.
Senator Brooks, yes. Senator Carozza,
Yes.
Senator Carozza, yes. Senator Hester,
Yes.
Senator Hester, yes. Senator Washington,
Yes.
Senator Washington, yes. Senator Simoneer, Senator Simoneer, yes. And Senator Feldman.
Yes, bill carries 10-1. Yes, sir.
To briefly explain my vote.
Sure.
And so while I understand the intent of the bill, I have to look at the greater good when it comes to some of these things. And just a couple of years ago, Mackenzie Phillips gave $40 million to Morgan State University, the largest ever. And to get $40 million to admit a family member, to me, I think is a small price to pay for that level of endowment going to an HBCU. And we know it happens all the time at the big universities, but to see this happen at HBCU, if that person said, I want you to admit my daughter, that's not a free ride, it's admit. And she still has to do the work, he or she. But I don't want to preclude that ever from happening, you know, with respect to an HBCU. So that's the reason that I'm opposing it. I understand, level the playing field, but it took a long time for Morgan to have somebody give that amount of money. And I've seen it go to University of Maryland College Park for years and years and years. And I want to see that flow of money continue. So thank you.
Anybody wants to explain their vote? I welcome it. I think it's good for the record. You know, it's good for, I think for a lot of reasons. Yes, Senator Carozza?
I found that explanation helpful, and since I represent University of Maryland Eastern Shore, I'd like to change my vote to nay.
Okay, Lemoria, you've got that. So that'll, Senator Carozza will go from a yay to the nay, and we're not requiring a vote card, as I say, like we do on the floor. Okay, so that will take us from to a 9-2 vote. Okay. Okay, let's move on to the next bill. We've got a local bill from Senator Jackson for Calvert County, Senate Bill 1124, Stacy.
This also has a cross file on the list. So Senate Bill 1124, Calvert County Ethics and Conflict of Interest and Commissioner Expulsion. This emergency bill requires Calvert County to include provisions in its ethics law that are equivalent to or exceed the provisions of state law relating to a court's authority to enforce the ethics law. To include provisions in its ethics law that require the Calvert County Ethics Commission to make public any recommendation it makes to expel a commissioner. And 3, enact a law or regulation that authorizes the governing body to remove a county elected official from office or for violations of conflict of interest statutes. And I just read you the House version that includes the Senate amendments. So essentially, there is an amendment from Senator Jackson in your packet on page 3 of that voting list. Essentially, it would have initially required the expulsion of certain members, but that was walked back a little bit. Thank you, Dia. And it requires governing body of Calvert County to enact a law that authorizes it to remove, rather than it requires it to remove a county elected official under specified circumstances. Sorry for screwing that up.
Okay, we have a single amendment from Senator Jackson on behalf of Calvert County. Yes, Senator Carozza.
So this just they're now just conforming
Yes,
two
this would
bills?
conform the Senate bill to the House bill.
which doesn't require,
Correct.
authorizes.
Yes,
Thank you.
welcome.
Okay, any additional questions? Okay, anybody want to move that single amendment? Do we have a motion favorable on the amendment from somebody? Okay, Vice Chair Kagan, is there a second from Senator Augustine? All in favor of the amendment on Senate Bill 1124, raise your hand. All opposed. That motion carries. Now we have Senate Bill 1124, and we've got the cross-file on the other list, which is House Bill 834. So this next vote will count for both bills in the same posture. Is there a motion favorable on the two bills? Favorable from Senator Hester, second from Senator Washington. Questions? All in favor of Senate Bill 1124 and the cross-file 834, which are identical, raise your hand. All opposed, all of that motion carries. Okay, let's next go over to this other list with one Senate bill on voting list number 51. We've got Senator Mouts, which is Senate Bill 1173. And we're going to go to Dara on that. And we've got the cross-file 1512 on the other list. So Dara, why don't we go again to you to 1173.
So Senate Bill 1173, Bay Restoration Fund, the use of funds, municipal wastewater facilities, sunset repeal. There's also House Bill 1512, which is before you in the exact same posture. The bill repeals the termination date of Chapter 413 of the Act of 2020. As a result, the bill would make permanent an authorization to use the Bay Restoration Fund septic account for specified costs associated with connecting a property using an on-site sewage disposal system to an existing municipal wastewater facility that has signed a funding agreement with the Department of the Environment and is under construction to achieve enhanced nutrient removal or biological nutrient removal level treatment. There are no amendments and there's no opposition. House Bill 1512 passed the House unanimously.
Okay, Senator Carozza moves favorable. And again, this favorable will be for Senate Bill 1173 and the cross-file from Delegates Adams and Hutchinson, second from Senator Gallion. Okay, we've got 1173 and House Bill 1512. All in favor of those two bills, raise your hand. All opposed, that motion carries. Okay, that takes care of the Senate bills. Now let's go to the big list, which is voting list number 48. And let's, again, like I've done in the past, I'd like to get through some of these local bills. So if you go to the second page, we've got some county delegation bills. Let's just roll those out. Let's start with HB 1017 from the Frederick County delegation. Dara, why don't you tell us what 1017 does?
House Bill 1017, boundary of the Frederick County Soil Conservation District alteration. This bill establishes the Frederick County Soil Conservation District to include both the Catoctin Soil Conservation District, apologies on the pronunciation, and the Frederick Soil Conservation District. There are no amendments and no opposition. The bill passed the House unanimously.
Okay, is there a motion from Frederick County? Senator Lewis Young, favorable motion from the senator from Frederick. Is there a second? From Senator Gallion. Again, we're on House Bill 1017. All in favor, raise your hand of the local bill. All opposed, that motion carries. Now let's go down to Howard County delegation. House Bill 1338. Dara.
House Bill 1338, Howard County Agricultural Preservation Advisory Board. Term length alteration is Howard County Bill number 1524. This bill alters the term of a member serving on the Agricultural Preservation Advisory Board in Howard County to 3 years from 5 years. Current members on the board can serve out the remainder of their 5-year terms. There are no amendments. There is no opposition to the bill. I believe it also passed the House unanimously.
Okay, does the senator from Howard and Montgomery want to make a motion? Okay, we've got a motion favorable on House Bill 1338 from Senator Hester. Is there a second? Second from Senator Lewis Young. All in favor, House Bill 1338, raise your hand. All opposed, House Bill 1338 carries. Now I go down to Dorchester County, House Bill 1409. Stacy?
House Bill 1409, Dorchester County Definition of Public School Employee Alteration. This bill includes supervisory, non-certificated employees, any individual who responsibly directs the work of other employees into the definition of public school employees for collective bargaining purposes. There are no amendments.
Okay, Senator Carozza moves favorable. Is there a second from Senator Gallion? All in favor of House Bill 1409, raise your hand on the favorable motion. All opposed, 1409 carries. Now let's go back to the front page, and we're just going to go down here. Alexis, why don't we start with House Bill 7?
House Bill 7, Housing Innovation Pilot Program and Housing Innovation Fund Establishment, Housing Innovation Pilot Program Act of 2024. This bill generally establishes a housing innovation pilot program funded through the newly established under the bill Housing Innovation Fund to provide loans for mixed income and cross-subsidized housing, which sets aside a certain percentage of housing for low-income residents for at least 99 years. This bill sunsets in 2029. The bill also authorizes public housing agencies and county governments to take advantage of loans from the Housing Innovation Fund. The bill requires project funding to be allocated before the end of the fiscal year. It removes a local, so these actually are the House amendments that were tagged on after the bill was introduced. So there was a local matching requirement in the bill as introduced. The House removed that local matching requirement. It also required the selection of at least 3 projects for funding, each in a different jurisdiction. The House amendments also required a mandatory appropriation from fiscal years 26 through fiscal years 2029 of $5 million. There's authorization for this mandatory appropriation to be funded through general obligation bond expenditures. There are amendments from the chair on the House bill, starting at page 3. And the amendments correct erroneous references to rental housing works instead of rental housing programs. So that's technical, makes an additional technical correction authorizing local housing developers to partner with county governments in the receipt of loans under the fund. It also makes the $5 million mandatory appropriation discretionary.
Okay, questions for Alexis about the amendments on House Bill 7? Okay, yes, Senator Augustine.
So you made the first one, May, the 5 million?
Yes.
Well, what about the out years? Are
Oh,
those-
so it's out years, all of May. It was just 26. The bill itself is 26 through 29 in terms of funding. So all of that is now discretionary.
Okay.
Okay, Senator Croza.
Were the amendments made, when were these amendments made?
So the ones I just talked about, the discretionary fund, that's the most significant. The others are technical. We haven't adopted those yet. But this bill is a cross file. So I mentioned what the House did in relationship to the Senate bill as introduced because we did have a hearing on the Senate bill. So when I was referencing the House bill, they modified the matching requirement by completely taking it off, required 3 projects to be funded, and
Those amendments
There's a
were
few other
offered
things.
before or after the House final vote? They weren't off, they're not being.
no, they were
offered-
offered in the House.
So they're not being offered now.
Right.
Okay.
No, working off of those.
Additional questions on the amendments? Okay, is there a motion favorable on these amendments? Motion?
Move favorable on the amendment.
Senator Augustine moves favorable, second from Senator Washington. Discussion? All in favor of these amendments, raise your hand on HBO 7, raise your hand. All opposed? Motion carries. Just process wise, SB 203, the cross file from Senator Wallstrikers, if we take a vote, will they be in the same?
Yep,
Posture.
the vote would be to confirm.
Okay, so again, if
What
we
we
do
just
take this
passed.
up, it's going to be a vote for both HB 7 and Senate Bill 203. So, okay. All right, so we got a favorable motion from Senator Augustine. Is there a second? Second from Vice Chair Kagan. Discussion. Okay, all in favor of HB 7 and Senate Bill 203, raise your hand. All opposed? Got 3 nays. We've got Senators Gallion, Carozza, and Simon Ayer are red. 8 yes, 3 no. Got that, Lamar?
Yeah.
Okay, let's go next, Stacy, to House Bill 75.
Mr. Chair, we still need to hold this bill, still being worked out.
Okay, that's a hold. Let's go next, Stacy, to House Bill 333.
House Bill 333, election law, election disinformation and improper influence related to voting. This bill requires the State Board of Elections to, one, maintain a portal on its website that the public may use to report election disinformation, which is incorrect or misleading information regarding the time, place, or manner of an election, election results, or voting rights in the state. And two, conduct a periodic review of material submitted by the public through the portal, and to the extent necessary, issue corrective information or refer submissions to the state prosecutor. The bill also defines influence under existing provisions that prohibit willfully and knowingly influencing or attempting to influence through specified means a voter's voting decision or decision whether to vote. Influence means to use pressure, deception, trickery, or direct or indirect authority to induce action or to change the decision or act of another, regardless of the medium used. There is one amendment offered by the chair on page 9 with a reprint beginning on page 10. So what this amendment does is it splits the definition of election disinformation and election misinformation, with disinformation being the knowing and deliberate dissemination of that, whereas election misinformation is just incorrect or misleading information regarding the things that are listed. One being a purposeful attempt, and the other being somebody may spread information, it may be incorrect, but there's no malintent offered. And if there's going to be a referral to the state prosecutor in those circumstances, there has to be some sort of intent language there. And the second part of that amendment is a revision to the definition of influence. So instead of meaning those things as it's listed in the bill, it says includes those things, because influence can be a positive thing. It's not necessarily involving trickery and a meant to deceive. So those are the two amendments.
We've got Vice Chair Kagan, question for Stacy on the amendments.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. First off, I had a lot of questions and a lot of concerns about this bill as it came in. I really want to commend Stacy and the chair. I think these amendments make it from being a bill I wasn't so excited about to a bill that does really make sense. So really props to you guys. Before making the motion for the amendment, unless there's more conversation, Stacy, on page 15 of the reprint, line 16, is the word "of" missing?
Where is that? Includes the use. Yes, you
Okay.
can add that in there.
So that's just a friendly amendment to the amendment. And just for purposes of putting it on the table, if there are more questions or whatever, I'd like to move the amendments to House Bill 333.
Okay, we have a favorable motion from the Vice Chair on the amendments, second from Senator Augustine. Any further discussion? All in favor of these amendments to Senate House Bill 333, raise your hand. Okay, all opposed, the amendment carries, that motion carries. So now we have House Bill 333 as amended in front of us. Favorable motion from Vice Chair Kagan, second from Senator Augustine. All in favor of House Bill 333 as amended, raise your hand. All opposed. Okay, we have an 8-3. We've got Senators Gallion, Carozza, Simonaire, Red. And you want to explain your vote? We're going to go to Senator Hester to explain her vote, but the bill carried 8-3. Senator Hester.
I just wanted to say that this is a really tricky issue, and we worked on it this summer in the joint committee. And we had both a private sector company and a university, come in and talk about this. And so I've managed to connect, Jared Demarinis and State Board of Elections with the university. And so I'm hoping that they'll be able to help look at all the information coming into the portal. It's a great bill.
Okay, let's next move down to House Bill 345 from Delegate Polakovich Carr. Dara?
House Bill 345, Fish and Wildlife Endangered and Threatened Species, Definitions, Petitions, and Regulations. This bill is the cross-file to Senate Bill 916 that passed this committee unanimously. The bill codifies the way in which the Department of Natural Resources identify and review endangered and threatened species. The bill alters certain definitions within the Endangered Species of Fish Conservation Act and the Non-Game and Endangered Species Conservation Act. The bill also sets requirements for certain petitions submitted to the department in relation to whether a species should be listed or unlisted as endangered or threatened. Lastly, the bill requires the Secretary of Natural Resources by July 1st, 2026, and at least every 5 years thereafter, to review and, if warranted, update regulations adopted under the two acts that contain the list of endangered species and threatened species. There are no amendments.
Okay, there are no amendments on, again, House Bill 345, which is a cross file to Senate Bill 916. Yes, absolutely. Senator Gallion.
So is this the bill that it was brought up on the floor, I believe by the minority leader about how oyster shells fit in here, if they would fall under that?
And also, Dara, on the 916 cross file that we, what was the vote in the committee? Just so
Yeah, I'll
we
get
we
that
refresh
right up
everybody's
there.
memory.
And it was
Is it different? Okay. I'm not sure that's the same bill, but let's,
I think
before you
10 to
answer.
nothing in committee and then 39-5 on the floor.
Okay, so back to Senator Gallion, point, you saying minority leader, recollection?
Wasn't there some?
So there was a question about whether an oyster shell would be considered an endangered species. I think the cart kind of comes before the horse on that question. It's not that a oyster shell would be an endangered species. It would be that an oyster could be classified as an endangered species and that an oyster included the shell. Like the oyster shell is still considered an oyster, but it's not oyster shells being endangered. It's if or threatened, it would be oysters. I don't know that.
The additional questions for Dara, and there are no amendments on this bill, so it's, okay, is there a? Turn that volume down. Okay, any additional questions on the bill? Again, we're on House Bill 345, cross file Senate Bill 916. And we have a motion from Senator Lewis Young. Is there a second? Okay, from Senator Brooks. Yeah, there are no amendments. It's a vote. Okay, House Bill 345. All in favor? Raise your hand. All opposed? That motion carries unanimously. Let's next go to Stacy on House Bill 428.
House Bill 428, Community Schools Rental Assistance for Community Schools Families Program and Fund Establishment. EEE is secondary committee on this bill. This was heard and passed by the Budget and Tax Committee 9-4. If you recall, this bill establishes the Rental Assistance for Community School Families Program and related fund to provide rental assistance to eligible student households at community schools. The Department of Housing and Community Development must administer the program in consultation with the Maryland State Department of Education, and the governor may include an appropriation of $10 million into the annual budget bill for the program. The House had made several amendments, but Budget and Tax Committee took it back much closer to what the Senate had originally passed, including lessening the duties of the Director of Community Schools in order to make the Department of Housing and Community Development the primary in administering this program.
Okay, again, this was a 9-4 vote in Budget and Taxation. So certainly open to questions for Stacy on this piece of legislation. Senator Carrozza.
I recall from this hearing, this is where we had the discussion that you could have schools that don't qualify as community schools in certain areas, but this is specifically just for the community schools.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, additional questions for Stacy on this piece of legislation? Okay, do we have a favorable motion from Senator Augustine? A second from Senator Lewis Young. We'll do a roll call on this one, given the B&T vote. Okay, so we've got, again, House Bill 428. We're second on this. We're going to go with roll call. Lamar.
All right, Senator Kagan?
Aye.
Senator Kagan, yes. Senator Augustine?
Yes.
Senator Augustine, yes. Senator Gallion?
No.
Senator Gallion, no. Senator Watson? Senator Watson, yes. Senator Lewis Young?
Yes.
Senator Lewis Young, yes. Senator Brooks?
Yes.
Senator Brooks, yes. Senator Carrozza?
No.
Senator Carrozza, no. Senator Hester? Senator Hester, yes. Senator Washington?
Yes.
Senator Washington, yes. And Senator Simoneau? Senator Simoneau, no. Senator Feldman?
Yes, the bill carries 8-3. Next, go to Delegate Chair Atterbury bill, House Bill 434, and Stacy.
So I brought the big guns to answer questions for this one in case you have any. House Bill 434, persons providing lobbyist compensation, statement of political contributions, exemption of nonprofits. This bill exempts qualified 501c3 nonprofit organizations from having to file a disclosure statement with the State Board of Elections for spending at least $500 to compensate one or more regulated lobbyists. There are no amendments.
Okay, we've got no amendments on House Bill 434. Questions?
Move favorable.
Okay, Senator Augustine moves favorable. Is there a second? From Senator, yes, Senator Watson, you have a question.
Yeah,
Here, before, can we take at least a second so we can get a conversation moving?
sure.
Senator Lewis Young seconded the Augustine motion. Senator Watson.
Stacy, what is the thing that this is trying to solve? What's the problem?
I'm gonna ask Dia to come up and explain.
Ethics Advisor, Daly is going to come up here. As was referenced, we bringing in the big guns on this one. Here, go up to the witness table. Yes. Clearly, you haven't been here in this committee that often. You can even go, you got to go up to the witness table. We're going to put you on the spot. We're not even going to swear you in. You're not under penalty of perjury or anything. Okay. Okay. Tell us who you are. So, because for the millions of people on the internet watching these voting session, tell everybody who you are.
For all my fans, for the record, Dia Daly, Ethics Counsel to the General Assembly. So normally, any entity, it's usually business entities that employ a lobbyist, they have to report their campaign contributions, separate report. The law used to say they only had to file this report if they made contributions. So a few years ago, you had an elections reform bill, and you said all entities that employ lobbyists have to file this form to get more compliance, because people just didn't know they had to file the form. They weren't sending the information to elections. So then what happened, you had some C3 organizations who couldn't make contributions, who were constantly having to fill out this form that says no contributions, no contributions, no contributions. And they said, why should we have to fill out the form when we're never going to report anything? So that's the situation it's
But
trying
that's
to
not to
address.
say that no C3s have ever been able to do that, right?
So it's my qualified C3s, yes. So it's my understanding that what was happening is you had employees of the C3s that were having to report their contributions, and they were being attributed to the C3, and then the C3 was freaking out because they weren't making these contributions.
Okay.
Any additional questions for Dia Daly?
And I
Okay.
think the vice chair
I'm
cross-filed.
confused. I'm confused. Can,
Okay,
I
let's
guess-
go to Senator Carozza.
can you give some example? Can you give some examples where this applies?
So it's my understanding the person who brought it, who testified at the House side was the Sexual Assault Resource Center, Lisa Jordan's group. And they were having to fill out these forms, but they couldn't make the contributions. So basically the forms were saying no contribution, no contribution, no contribution. And it wasn't giving elections any additional information. It was just creating paperwork.
Give me an example of then who does file this?
So if you have Verizon is a business, so they're going to report all of the contributions made by their various principals.
The individuals and the PACs.
So let's say I'm the president of John Doe Widgets and I have a lobbyist. So John Doe Widgets has to file a report because they have a lobbyist. They're going to report everybody's contributions for the principals. And it's my understanding what was happening before is you only had to file the report if you had a contribution, and then nobody was filing the reports because elections didn't know who had made contributions. The Ethics Commission couldn't say, oh, this person needed to file this report because they didn't know who made the contributions. So that's why a few years ago you said everybody has to file a report if they employ a lobbyist. And then the C3s were saying, yeah, but we're filing reports that say we're not making contributions.
Confusing about this. This says persons providing lobbyist compensation.
Mhm.
It should be organizations, right?
A person includes an organization.
That's a terminology issue. Okay. Okay, let's go around the horn. We're not gonna spend an hour on this bill. I mean, if it, you know, but let's go through. No, that's Senator Lewis Young, Gallion, and then we'll go to Senator Washington and we'll see where we are. And if we're still, you know, a little confused about it, then we'll take it from there. But Senator Lewis Young.
Yeah, thank you. I don't think I'm confused, but I want to make sure I understand it correctly. It is my understanding that the 501c3 cannot make a political contribution, or they would be endangered of losing that status. So by forcing them to fill out the paperwork constantly when they're not allowed to do it in the first place, it's just an administrative nightmare. And this bill is relieving that burden of a task that really isn't necessary by definition of their status.
Correct. The certain that you see in, I think it's in the short title or in the purpose paragraph, it refers to certain nonprofits. But then when you wiggle down and look at who's actually being impacted, it's just the C3s, which are a subset of nonprofits. Hence, we use the term certain.
Okay, Senator Gallion and then Senator Washington.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So if you have a good sized 501c3 that decides to hire a registered lobbyist and pays them $1,000 a year, now they would not have to file this statement under this law?
This statement is only related to their campaign contributions. So they're still registering as a lobbyist. They're still reporting on their activities. They're still, if they host a reception, they're still reporting on that. So all that normal lobbying stuff is being reported. They're just not saying we didn't make campaign contributions.
Okay, so if you had a lobbyist that's working for a 501c3 that's helping them get like LBIs, so that's not, you're saying it's kind of separate here.
So the lobbyist is still going to report, or the organization is still going to report, we paid Dia Daly to be our lobbyist. We paid her $1,000 a year. We gave gifts totaling $500, but they're not going to report, and we made no campaign contributions. Because as Senator Lewis said, they're not making those contributions.
Senator Washington? Okay. Okay, do folks feel like they have enough information here to weigh in or take a vote? Stacey, I apologize. So there are amendments or no amendments? Okay, so we have no amendments. We've got House Bill 434 clean in front of us. Is there any kind of motion from Senator Lewis Young, second from Senator Washington? Discussion? Okay, I'll favor House Bill 434. Raise your hand. All opposed? Okay, we've got one dissenting, one red vote from Senator Watson. Is that it? Okay, the bill carries 10-1. We're going to next go to House Bill 457, and we're going to go to you, Dara. I will preface this one by saying that if you recall, this has to do with the turf issue, synthetic turf. Bill came in as a chain of custody, a bill from Delegate Lehman. We've had a lot of back and forth with the House, and so what you're going to hear is an amendment that I believe I can represent as a compromise that I believe the House is supportive of. And, you know, again, that's just for background. That doesn't mean we can't have full discussion about the subject. I just want to lay that out there. So the amendment is to some extent converting this into a fairly robust study of the topic. But that said, I'm going to turn it to you, Dara, just to refresh everybody's memory about the subject.
So the amendment in question begins on page 25 of your voting package for voting list number 48, with a reprint beginning on page 29, I believe. So House Bill 457, Environment Synthetic Turf Chain of Custody. The bill requires the Department of the Environment to establish a system to track the chain of custody of synthetic turf installed on sports and playing fields in the state. The custodian of a synthetic turf sports or playing field installed in the state must report specified chain of custody information to the department. The department must maintain the information permanently and develop and maintain a publicly accessible website that includes specified chain of custody information. The bill also requires specified disclosures by producers and sellers of synthetic turf and establishes an administrative penalty for violations of the bill. As mentioned, there is one amendment from the chair. The amendment removes the chain of custody requirements and all related provisions. The amendment also requires the department, in consultation with specified stakeholders, to conduct a study on synthetic turf, existing turf fields in the state, and the synthetic turf industry in the state.
Second.
Okay, we've got a motion favorable on the amendment from Senator Augustine, second from Vice Chair Kagan. Any just discussion about converting this into a study? Yes, Senator Carozza.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the amendments. I understand the study part. Just wanted to better understand the disclosure part.
Dara, yeah, go on.
So the disclosure requirement is that a producer of synthetic turf, and both of these are defined terms in the bill, producer or seller, before the sale of synthetic turf is required to disclose to the customer the typical maintenance performed throughout the lifetime of a synthetic turf field and the typical costs for removing or replacing or disposing of the turf.
Sure, is all on the manufacturers and not the end user.
On the producer or the seller to disclose to the customer. It's like an information disclosure of in advance of purchasing this. And this is the typical maintenance that you're going to have to undertake once you purchase it. And then here are typical costs you may incur in relation to removing, replacing, or disposing of it.
So just to be completely clear, the end user, whether it's a school or a recreational facility or whatever, there's no requirements.
They do not have disclosure requirements under this bill. The disclosure is only for the producer or seller.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Additional questions for Dara just on the amendment. Okay, we had a favorable motion and a second on just on the amendment. Okay. All in favor of this amendment, raise your hand. All opposed, the amendment carries. We have 457 as amended in front of us. Favorable from the Vice Chair, second from Senator Augustine. Questions? Yes,
Quick comment.
sure.
Mr. Chair, colleagues, I cross-filed this bill many years ago. This has been before us a bunch of times, and we have to figure out how to deal with these toxic, dangerous products, and yet also to do it responsibly. And so, once again, thank the chair and council for thoughtful amendments. And I think it's a really good first step rather than not taking action at all again this year. So, so I totally support this as amended. Thank you.
Okay, all in favor of the favorable motion on the bill as amended 457, raise your hand. All opposed, that bill carries unanimously. I want to leave the governor's two bills. Let's just knock out the second page and then we'll have the rest of our time today will be, we're not in session till 4 o'clock, folks. So I want to give ample time for the governor's two bills here. So let's go to the second page. Not that much on here. House Bill 700, Stacy, let's again.
House Bill 700, Election Law, Election Judges Revisions. This bill defines returning election judge for the purposes of existing additional compensation provided to returning election judges to mean an election judge who has served a term of office for the immediately preceding presidential or gubernatorial election. The bill authorizes a public school student who serves as an election judge to both, one, earn service learning hours and receive compensation. The bill requires that a county employee who serves as an election judge during the hours the employee is scheduled to work receive administrative leave and election judge compensation. The bill also requires the State Board of Elections to adopt regulations to standardize and minimize specified forms or documentation required of election judges. There is one amendment offered by the chair on page 73, which is the very back of your packet. And these amendments would require the state board to implement the election judge recruitment campaign instead of just provide it to local boards, and authorizes local boards to supplement this state board campaign. It clarifies provisions regarding who's considered a returning election judge for purposes of determining a bonus, and it strikes the provisions regarding the public school students in service hours.
Wait, sorry, the last thing.
Just repeat the last
Could you
part.
just say the last thing?
I said it strikes the provisions regarding public school students in service hours. So the current policy is that students may either get service learning credits or be paid, and they can choose. There is a broad State Board of Education policy that students cannot receive service learning credits if you are paid or compensated for student service. The concern is that by overturning that here, other persons would come to the state board and start asking for waivers from that existing policy. And the determination was that students can still do this, but they get to make the choice if they prefer to be compensated or they prefer to earn student service credits to retain that policy.
Vice Chair Kagan.
So first off, so thank you, Stacy. So it says on page 4, strike in their entirety, lines 22 through 27 inclusive. I'm
Right.
looking at the House reprint and it
What-
ends at line 24. Am I looking at the wrong place? The wrong version?
Here, let me put the bill.
House Bill 700 reprint.
It's page 4, 22 through 27, my bill. That's correct.
Okay, so which version do you want me in if it's not the reprint?
Well, you look at the bill, not the reprint. I mean, the bill is the third reader version, and that's what the amendments are drawn to.
So I will go into that 22 to 20. Okay, yep, interesting. Okay, so here's what I've got. So the either pick service learning hours or money is what we've done. There's a part of me that's been fine with that. It has been, I've been approached to talk about how this is part of the administration's and frankly, somewhat Maryland's philosophy towards paying people, including young people, for their time and valuing them. And that's like the service learning year, the service year option where they are paid for their time and they are not volunteers, they are not interns. And if they are doing the same job as a grown-up person and we're having trouble recruiting judges, the argument that has been made to me is that they should be able to do yes and. So I think, Mr. Chair, that so I don't know, Stacy, whether this is possible. I think that is a different part of the conversation. I wonder whether we could move the other amendments, amendments 1 and 2, all the way down until the last line. And I suspect that those are not controversial, and then have the conversation about either or and separately, because I think that might need to. Okay,
Okay,
so that's a concept.
Okay, so you've raised an issue about that third component about the and versus the. Let's open up other questions so we know what the universe of issues potentially are. Yes, Senator Carrozza.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't know if we have anybody from the State Board of Elections.
I don't think we do.
Okay, so I'm trying, as far as how this would work in reality, you've got I went to the reprint. You have the state board that's going to develop.
So that there's no reprint that has these amendments in it, because this is the third reader version of House Bill 700. You just go to the bill.
No, I pulled the bill from House
Right.
House Bill.
There's no
700.
reprint. I'm just saying, these amendments are on my
Okay.
desk, so there's no
Okay,
reprint.
so I'm reading the bill and I'm trying to understand how the bill works, so I then understand how the amendments work. This is, the state board's required to come up with this marketing campaign with the purpose of recruiting more judges.
correct?
Correct. So that's existing law actually, and it was just moved to a new section. And then the state board decided instead of providing the campaign to locals to implement, that the state board would prefer to just implement the campaign itself.
So this is, so at the state level, they're running the campaign. So what are the local boards of election? What is their either responsibility or coordination, or how do they play in this?
So under existing law, it says the state board shall develop and provide to local boards a marketing campaign. So the locals would be the ones to run that campaign in their jurisdiction. The change in this bill, House Bill 700, if you look on page 4 and you look through lines 13 through 21, you'll see that's existing language. And it has been moved, if you look on page 2, to a new section in the election law article, lines 6 through 16. That's kind of just a maneuver, moving existing law into a different part. It looks like it's new, but it's not. The change here in these amendments is it says the state board shall develop and implement versus provide to the local boards. So the local boards are relieved of the responsibility here. The state board will implement the program. And if a local board wishes to supplement that program, they can do that.
So then that would address the concern that in the letter of information from the Maryland Association of Election Officials, where they were proposing, they seem concerned about the enactment date. Does that?
An idea. Not to interrupt. What I'm going to propose is, because there seem like there's, questions, Vice Chair Kagan, let's push this to the end of the calendar. I'd like to kind of get through the list, including the governor's bills, and I think we'll have time to come back to this bill at the end and then, continue the dialogue. I just don't want to run out of time on the governor's stuff, to be honest, but I think we'll have time to come back. So let's just defer conversation on HB 700, and then let's continue down the list, and then we'll come back to this at the end. Okay, does that sound fair? Okay, let's go now to Alexis on House Bill 860.
House Bill 860, Housing and Community Development, Community Action Boards. This bill repeals membership requirements for community action boards under current law and requires a community action board to meet requirements for a tripartite board as established under federal law.
Okay, are there any amendments?
No.
Okay, so we have House Bill 860 from Delegate Allen, clean with no amendments. Favorable from Senator Augustine. Second from Senator Watson. Okay, discussion. Okay. All in favor of House Bill 860, raise your hand. All opposed, that motion carries unanimously. Let's next go to House Bill 981.
House Bill 981, Principal Departments, individuals with limited English proficiency, access to public services. This bill requires each principal department of state government to fully implement by July 1st, 2025, codified requirements to take reasonable steps to provide equal access to public services for individuals with limited English proficiency.
Any amendments?
No amendments.
Okay, we have House Bill 981, no amendments. Missing a couple of where our peak folks leave. Is there a second? Second from Karen, Senator Lewis Young. Okay, 981 has been moved favorable, clean, no amendments. Discussion. All in favor, House Bill 981. Raise your hand. All opposed, 981 carries unanimously. Let's go to you, Dara. House Bill 991.
House Bill 991, Agriculture, Food Processing Residuals Utilization Permit Establishment. This bill is the cross-file of Senate Bill 1074, which passed this committee and the Senate unanimously. The bill establishes a regulatory program in the Department of Agriculture related to the utilization of food processing residuals. Specifically, the bill requires a person to obtain a permit from the department before the person may utilize food processing residuals in the state, and establishes related requirements and enforcement provisions. The department must set reasonable fees to cover the department's cost of administering the program, which are held in a newly established food processing residuals administration fund. The bill also authorizes the department to administer a certification program for individuals who haul food processing residuals. There's one amendment from the sponsor. The amendment makes a number of technical changes, removes provisions relating to hauling routes. It also authorizes regulations adopted by the department to carry out the bill to include acceptable nutrient application rates, including rates for nitrogen, phosphorus, and heavy metals, consistent with recommendations published or accepted by the department for nutrient management.
Okay, we have an amendment. We've got Senator Gallion has questions on the about the amendment, and then we'll go to Senator Carosa after that.
So the amendment that we had passed like a few amendments on the version before it went over. So the amendment, does it put back some language? I'm
gonna loathe to say put back because that language certain language wasn't taken out of the House version. There was that language relating to harm to the environment or harm to public health and things like that. That language is in this version of the bill. The language about hauling routes has been taken out.
So is there anything in here about MDA's ability to or authority to revoke a permit? Has that changed from the Senate version?
Let me just pull up the reprint one moment. So how this bill reads is that the department may suspend, revoke, or modify a permit issued under this subtitle in accordance with the Administrative Procedure Act if the department finds that the permit application contained false or inaccurate information, there's been a substantial deviation from the plan, specifications, or other documents approved by the department, or any requirements established by the department. A representative of the department seeking to inspect a site in accordance with the subtitle has been refused entry to any area covered by the permit. There is or has been a violation of the subtitle, any regulation adopted under the subtitle, or any condition of the permit, or there is any other good cause as determined by the department. In relation to how it looked coming out of for Senate Bill 1074.
Is anybody in the audience up to speed on this? Okay, we're gonna be brief, and if we take too much more, we're gonna put this back to the end of the calendar too. But come up real quick, specifically to Senator Gallion's question. I just want to keep it tight, just in response to the question from Senator Gallion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Matt Stegman from the Chesapeake Bay Foundation. So to your question specifically, there was an amendment that was taken in the Senate about the circumstances under which MDA could decline to issue a permit. This amendment does not include that language. It includes the language of the bill as it was introduced. And my understanding is that the Senate, that the amendments being offered here would conform the bill as it's currently working its way through the House.
So I'm sorry, your question was about denial or revocation?
So when it comes to revoking a permit, can you tell us what restoring the language? Well, that was an original bill. How does that line up with what we had passed in the Senate? What's the difference there?
The language that was adopted in the Senate was a little more prescriptive of MDA's authority to regulate. It was the question about the definition of public health, safety, and welfare.
Okay, so this opens it and makes it broader for MDA, because I think one of the reasons for that amendment was we try to tighten that up a little bit. So this would take it back to a broader posture, correct?
It is a little bit broader, yes. Okay. But I believe the Senate and House sponsor had discussed it among themselves and we're both comfortable with this version.
Okay, are there any additional questions? Otherwise, if people still feel, do we have any other questions? Okay, yeah, so if you've got then I'm gonna do the same, I don't not to, why don't you get your question, then if we gonna go a little longer, again, I'll put this to the back of the calendar and come back to this bill, but why don't you get your question out, Senator Carrozza, before we do that?
I know there was a lot of back and forth, and so I was trying to, I also saw at one point that Delmarva Poultry Chicken Association was involved in some feedback, and I just haven't been able to check with them on this latest revision, so I wanted to check.
Okay, so let's, we're gonna push this back to the end of the calendar and continue through this list, and then we've got two bills now that we've pushed back to the end. Okay, so let's go to House Bill 992, Dara.
House Bill 992, Environment Delegated Authorities Well and Septic Program Permits. This bill is the cross-file of Senate Bill 835, which passed the committee unanimously, and which we discussed in a concurrence earlier. Again, the bill requires a local health department or county government to which the Department of the Environment has delegated authority to administer a well and septic program to submit a schedule of review times for well and septic program permits to the department. The bill also establishes a schedule for the local health department or county government to submit program permit data to the department. There's no opposition, there are no amendments.
Okay, so this is the same posture as the bill we've already passed out of the Senate. There's no amendments. Senator Hester, you move favorable. Second from Senator Augustine. Discussion. Okay, all in favor of House Bill 992, raise your hand. All opposed, that bill carries unanimously. Let's go down to House Bill 1028. And then, yes, just refresh everybody, this is a cross file of Senate Bill 951, which we've already passed. And I think what we're probably going to want to do here is just conform this to what we've already passed. But why don't you just refresh everybody's memory about this piece of legislation?
So House Bill 1028 is the cross file to Senate Bill 959, Senate Bill 951,
yeah,
thank you.
951.
Electric Vehicle Supply Equipment Work Group. As the cross file passed the Senate, so that's Senate Bill 951 passed the Senate. The bill established the Electric Vehicle Supply Equipment Work Group as a 2-year work group chaired by the chair of the Public Service Commission and staffed by the Public Service Commission. The work group's role is to develop a framework for reliability and reporting of electric vehicle charging stations. Before us is the House bill, which is non-identical to the Senate bill in the following ways. The Senate bill required a member of the Maryland Energy Administration to be a part of the work group. The House bill before us does not. The House bill before us has the governor designating the chair, while as mentioned, the Senate bill required the Public Service Commission chair to chair the work group. So if we are more amenable to the Senate version as it passed this chamber, then we will want to adopt a conforming amendment to this House bill to add the Maryland Energy Administration to the work group and to change staffing from the governor's designation to the Public Service, to change the chairship from the governor's designee to the Public Service Commission chair.
Okay, just to refresh everybody's memory, the Senate Bill 951, the vote was unanimous. I think it was unanimous.
Right.
I mean, the Senate Bill,
Yes,
Senate Bill
for the Senate bill.
951.
This
Okay, I'm just going to put it out there. I'm going to move that we just conform the House bill to the Senate bill that we've already passed out of this committee. Got a motion, second from Senator Augustine. Anybody have a problem with just sticking with how we did it? Okay, all in favor of amending the bill, House Bill 1028 to make it look like the bill we passed, and raise your hand. Okay, all opposed, that carries. Let's next go to House Bill 1076. Delegate Roberts.
House Bill 1076, Education, Blind and Visually Impaired Students Textbook Equity. This bill requires by January 1, 2025, local boards of education to require publishers that sell pupil edition textbooks to provide an electronic file of the textbook in a specified standard to the National Instructional Materials Access Center when the publisher provides the textbook. The Maryland State Department of Education, NIMAC, and the local boards must enter into a memorandum of understanding to accomplish these purposes. Local boards must, by March 15th each year, determine the instructional materials that will be used in the upcoming school year by students with individualized education programs, or IEPs, in Section 504 plans under the Federal Rehabilitation Act of 1973. A local board must coordinate with the Instructional Resources Center to provide the instructional materials in a specialized formats to students who are blind or visually impaired no later than the first day of classes of the upcoming school year. If a local board is unable to fulfill these requirements, the local board and the family of the student must develop and agree on a plan to remedy the delivery of the instructional materials no later than 45 days before the first day of classes of the upcoming school year. MSDE must provide support to the IRC to ensure that textbooks and supplemental materials in a specialized format are available to blind and visually impaired students statewide. There are no amendments.
Okay, I've got a motion favorable on House Bill 1076 from Senator Watson, second from Senator Augustine. Any questions? Seeing none, all in favor, House Bill 1076, raise your hand. All opposed, 1076 carries unanimously. Let's go to House Bill 1264. Dara?
House Bill 1264, reservoir, dam, or waterway obstruction and construction permits, conditions for exemption. This bill expands the conditions under which a person is exempt from obtaining a permit from the Department of Environment to construct or repair a reservoir, dam, or waterway obstruction. Specifically, an existing exemption for certain small ponds is modified to remove the requirement that the pond not be located within drainage of the Gwynn Falls, Jones Falls, or Herring Run streams situated in or adjacent to Baltimore City. There are no amendments and no opposition. The bill passed the House unanimously.
Okay, we've got House Bill 1264, Senator Washington.
See this again.
Okay.
Right, yeah, can I hold, sorry, I meant to, alert the committee about this. I need to hold it. It's a problem.
Okay, so we're gonna hold House Bill 1264 till our next voting session, which will likely be tomorrow at some point. And then House Bill 1393 from Delegate Crosby, Council has advised me there is an issue has popped up on that one that I think we're gonna have to also hold. Before we go back to the other bills that we deferred to the end of the calendar, I do want to take up now the governor's two bills. And so let's see where we stand now. Let's Brad Fallon, why don't you come up to the witness stand, and we've got the JPR counsel who's on his way. So we're going to start with the bill that House Bill 693, where we're secondary. So JPR has already passed this piece of legislation. Remind committee, what was the vote in JPR on House Bill 693?
And Mr. Chair,
Maybe you know.
is unanimous.
It was a unanimous vote. Okay, well, thank you, Brad. Let's wait just a few minutes for JPR counsel who is involved in this. And again, this is again House Bill 693. So let's Alexis, why don't you maybe lead off? And yeah, I'm not sure what counsel looks like, so I won't know if they walk in. What's his name?
Shamari.
Shamari. Okay, we're gonna look for Shamari. Okay, Alexis, why don't you kind of lead off, and then we'll maybe go to Brad and then counsel from JPR, and then we'll take questions. We're starting again with 693.
All right, so this departmental bill as amended from the House establishes the Office of Tenant and Landlord Affairs and the Department of Housing and Community Development to provide tenant resources, including a tenant's bill of rights. And the office would receive documents in certain residential rental property transactions. The bill establishes a tenant's exclusive negotiation period and right of first refusal for the sale of residential rental properties that have 3 or fewer individual dwelling units under some circumstances. The bill decreases from 2 months' rent to 1 month's rent the maximum security deposit that may be imposed by a landlord. It also prohibits a lease from requiring a tenant to pay more than the sum of the security deposit and the first month's rent in order to start the lease. The bill establishes a tenant's exclusive negotiation period. I think I may have mentioned that. Requires landlords to provide proof of sending notice when filing a failure to pay rent eviction requires a judge to stay an eviction if the property is subject to extreme weather conditions, and increases certain court surcharges. The JPR amendments raise eviction filing surcharges and filing fee caps, and authorizes a landlord to impose a security deposit for up to 2 months' rent if the tenant has qualified for utility assistance, if the lease requires the tenant to pay utilities directly to the landlord, and if the tenant and the landlord have agreed to this increase in payment in writing.
Okay, Shamari's on his way. He has advised it, so since they're right across the hall. Brad, just maybe why don't we start with you and Shamari can add, just so we understand what the bill as it came in and how it is now with these amendments, just from where you sit or the administration's point of view, just so we understand what kind of changes, because I'll just be candid, I wouldn't have thought the bill would have passed unanimously as introduced, and so clearly there are some amendments here. So maybe you could speak to that, and Shamari will chime in when he shows up.
Absolutely happy to, and thank you, Mr. Chair. I shared in your surprise that it passed unanimously, quite frankly, but I'm very happy to see it because it is not substantially different than the way it came in.
Shamari's gonna
Shamari.
join you. Okay.
And Shamari, the question was, how did they come and change? He wrote a lot of these changes, so can certainly assist me in that.
Yeah, why don't you, what I want to get to is just the changes that were made in JPR to the bill as introduced.
Sure.
You could walk the committee through that.
So in JPR, we voted this yesterday. The main substantive changes are we lowered the district court surcharge from $83 to $43. The other change that we made is we struck a notice provision that required a landlord to deliver a notice of the right of first refusal by certified mail, and just made that first class mail. And that's, give me a second, I'll find the page. Right, page 24. And then we made some clarifying language changes that were requested by the Maryland Land Title Association to the right of first refusal. That's on page 15. And then we also deleted on page the right of a tenant to enjoin a sale that's occurred if the landlord hasn't complied with the requirements of the new section. And that is on page 20, subsection H. And then we left the same. There was arguments from stakeholders about raising the security deposit, or about leaving the security deposit at 2 months. The committee kept that at 1 month. That's on page 21. That's not a change from how the bill came in, but that was a source of a lot of discussion. And then we made some technical changes. There was a change to page 25. We deleted language about the state of emergency because that had been deleted by the House in subparagraph D2, or the old D2. We took that language out, and so we made subparagraph I just consistent with that. And so as far as on page 25 through 28 or 29, actually, those two from 25 to 28, those are two different sections. Those are identical sections, but section 2, it abrogates if House Bill 370 goes into effect. And House Bill 370 is a bill that deals with funding for tenants who qualify a certain incomes level. So a portion of the funds collected from the surcharge will go to that fund if that bill passes. And the last substantive change we made is we made the district court surcharge only applicable to summary ejectment actions. That's failure to pay rent cases. We removed the provision that would allow that surcharge for tenant holding over cases and breach of lease cases. And so that charge for those cases would be the $85, I believe, for any other civil case. Sorry, $28. $28 per civil case. And that's the extent of the substantive changes. There's some clerical and technical changes throughout, but that's it.
Okay, well, thank you. So let's open up questions for either of our two visitors. We're going to start with Senator Gallion, then Senator Watson after that. Senator Gallion.
Yeah, thank you. First question. So who was our representative in that hearing from the committee? Okay.
Senator Washington.
And then the other question would be for the panel. There's been so much stuff on the news recently about these issues like with squatters and things like that. Does this bill address any landlord's rights when it comes to squatters?
No, the bill doesn't contemplate anything
Silent
in
on
that
that.
realm. Yeah.
Okay, so it's just pretty much renters' rights is not really delving much into the rights of these property.
And there's a separate action under the property code for squatters.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry.
I was remiss. Tell us who you are for everybody watching on, because you're streaming it all there. I'm not sure we got you on the record. Yeah.
Shamari Taylor, Counsel for Judicial Proceedings Committee.
Perfect. Okay, we're going to go to Senator Watson next.
All right, thank you, Shamari. Just in plain English, just once again, the filing fees have gone up for landlords if they want to evict someone. From
Correct.
what to what?
It went up, so today current law is $8.
Right.
For a surcharge that district court can assess.
Yep.
Originally, as the bill came in, it was $93. And then the House sent the bill over to the Senate at $83. And then after having discussions with the governor's office and other stakeholders, it's now down to $43.
$43. And if the landlord wins the case, do they get that money recouped?
So yes, as the bill is correct right now.
They do get that money recouped.
And if I made just one point of clarification, the bill as originally introduced looked to increases for summary ejectment for tenant holding over and breach of lease cases. The bill as it left JPR, as Shamari mentioned, cuts that down to just summary ejectment. So these are failure to pay rent cases.
Yep.
The other cases have different standards set.
And the last question, if a landlord has significant challenges with a tenant through the course of the year, but at the end of the lease term, everything is current, can the landlord go somewhere else, or are they required to continue leasing to that person?
Yeah, that concept is known as just cause or good cause. There is a bill that passed through the House to do that. That is currently being considered in JPR, but no component of it is in this piece of legislation.
No component
No
is in this
component.
legislation.
None.
So being a landlord for many, many years, there's the best tenant is to have that one that requires minimum overhead, right? And so if I have somebody who's late, catch up, late, catch up, noise disturbance fixed and all of those things, when the lease is up, I want them gone.
Mhm.
You know, I don't want any management overhead. And so you're saying that this bill does not preclude me from doing that?
Yep, does not impact that at all.
All right, thank you.
Okay, we're going to go to Senator Washington, our representative on this bill in the Judicial Proceedings Committee.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think one of the things that was most, it's a component of the bill that I found, I guess, shocking, or that was very, the testimony was the sheriff from Baltimore City saying that because that the cost, the $8 did not cover the cost of the serving of these eviction notices, and that in some areas, I guess, of the state, that the eviction notice is being used as a collection agency. So essentially, the sheriff departments across the state are being used as collection agencies. And so raising the fee to at least cover the costs of those seem to be, to me to be very compelling. And so again, that was, and yeah, he actually said that he served more eviction notices because again, it was just considered as part of debt collection, more than he was able to serve other notices, criminal, notices and going after, you know, the bad guys. So to reduce those bad actors that are using the sheriff's office as a debt collector will allow us for them to spend more time on keeping communities safe. So that to me was the very, very compelling part of this legislation. So thank you so much for coming to a resolution that everyone could agree with.
Okay, additional questions for our two visitors? Okay, so we have a bill from JPR. So the only question really for us at this point, I think primarily is, do we vote the bill as it came to us from the Judicial Proceedings Committee? And if you think that's a good idea, then you might want to consider moving favorable on the JPR product. Okay, so Senator Washington is moving the JPR product favorable. Is there a second from Senator Augustine? Okay, on this one, let's go around the horn. We'll take a roll call. No, there is no, this is just the JPR product.
Yeah, fine.
Yeah, this is their product. That's the only thing in front of us. Okay, we're going to take a vote on the motion in favorable on the JPR product.
Senator Kagan. Senator Kagan, yes. Senator Augustine. Yes. Senator Augustine, yes. Senator Gallion. Senator Gallion, no. Senator Watson. Yes. Senator Watson, yes. Senator Lewis Young.
Yes.
Senator Lewis Young, yes. Senator Brooks. Yes. Senator Brooks, yes. Senator Carozza. Yes. Senator Carozza, no. Senator Hester. Yes. Senator Hester, yes. Senator Washington.
Yes.
Senator Washington, yes. And Senator Simonaire, no. And Senator Feldman.
Okay, yes, so the bill carries 8-3. We will send that back to the JPR and they'll be responsible for defending the product on the floor, which brings us to the other bill from the administration, House Bill 538. And Alexis, why don't you, again, on this one, why don't you lay it out? We had a bill hearing quite some time ago, and so refresh our memory, and then Brad, you guys can, when we've got Dara as well. Okay, House Bill 538, Alexis.
House Bill 538, Land Use, Affordable Housing, Zoning, Density and Permitting, Housing Expansion and Affordability Act of 2024. As amended in the House, before us is a third reader version of this bill. The bill establishes the Historic Property Revitalization Director within the Department of Housing and Community Development to discharge duties related to state-owned property. It prohibits local legislative bodies from prohibiting the placement of manufactured homes or modular homes in single-family zones. Removes a section of the bill as introduced that prohibited a local jurisdiction from using an element of an adequate public facilities law (ADFO) ordinance to deny a permit or impose unreasonable restrictions on state-funded affordable housing. It increases allowable densities for qualified residential projects that provide housing in single-family, multifamily, and mixed-use zones, and that are either located on formerly state-owned property, located near a rail station, or are controlled by a nonprofit organization. Prohibits a local jurisdiction from imposing unreasonable limitations on qualified projects. Limits the number of public hearings that a local jurisdiction may require before the Board of Appeals or Historic Commission. Prohibits qualified projects on agricultural and conservation land from exceeding density limits as prescribed. Requires qualified projects and non-residential zones to submit a public health impact assessment for approval by DHCD, and delays the bill's effective date from January 1st, 2025. Included in our packet are amendments from the chair. There's a standalone packet with amendments with 4 separate amendments from Senator Gallion. These amendments from the chair are in a reprint on page 35 of our packet. And they modify the manufactured home and modular dwelling provisions by allowing these to be located on single family zones or on property that was owned by former military reservations that is at least 80 acres and that is federally owned. In addition to other allowable density increases, the amendment would increase allowable densities for qualified residential projects that provide affordable housing on lands currently or formerly owned by the federal government that is greater than 80 acres and that was a site of a former U.S. military reservation. They modified density bonuses on state or federal property for qualified projects and mixed-use zones by allowing the density limits to be increased to the extent they do not exceed the highest density allowed in residential units or 6 units per gross acre, whichever is greater. Modifies density bonuses in areas near a rail station by allowing density bonuses 5% greater than the density bonuses allowed under the bill if a county already has the excess density bonuses allowed under the bill, and restricts 20% of those units for affordable use on or before December 31st, 2024. The amendment would exempt from density bonuses in areas near a rail station, properties located on higher education campuses, or properties where only a portion of the property is located within the boundaries specified in the bill. It also modifies the definition of unreasonable limitation or requirements such that these local limitations or requirements would amount to a de facto denial through having an adverse impact on the viability of the project. And the 4 Senator Gallion amendments included in the second packet. Amendment ID 113920 would further modify the definition of unreasonable limitation or requirement to mean and include an arbitrary limitation or requirement that has no other valid basis other than to create a substantial adverse impact. Amendment ID 373327 deals with density bonuses for entities that are controlled by a nonprofit. Under this amendment, a nonprofit that improves the land may only be eligible for a density bonus if the nonprofit has majority voting and management control. Currently, an entity that is controlled by a nonprofit must be a managing member, general partner, or otherwise controlling entity.
I'm sorry.
This is a standalone, so it's not in the reprint. It's 4 in a little sliver of a packet that was passed along separately. And this is amendment number 2 of that standalone packet. Senator Gallion's amendment number 2. Those were the chair amendments that were in the packet. And they were on page, I think 25, I said, but let me not 25, 35. So packet page 35 for the chair of the reprint in the packet.
These are chair's amendments from the House aspect.
That's right. And then what I've been calling out are individually Senator Gallion's amendments to the same House bill. So the third is amendment ID 103923. So that's page 3 of the smaller packet. And this prohibits density bonuses within the boundaries of federal historic districts. Number 4 on the back page, amendment ID 633125 would allow a legislative body to adopt a local law to prohibit the placement of modular and manufactured dwellings, and would allow a local county to opt out of the provisions of the bill entirely.
Yeah, why don't we do this? Yeah, you want to ask questions as we go along kind of thing? I apologize. Yeah.
At what point would you like me to explain further my amendments? Would you like to do yours first?
Yeah,
and
let Alexis finish up the whole body, and then I'm going to yield to you, and you can focus in on your amendment specifically. Why don't we? You're done? Okay, we're going to yield to you. You're going to explain your amendments. Okay.
Okay, I'm trying.
In some instances, they replace. So the definition of unreasonable limitation, that can't be tagged on top. And the second amendment, 633125 would be in contrast to the chair's amendment, because it would be a opt-out provision from all of the portions of the bill. And the latter is in contrast to the chair's amendment as well, because that modifies the definition of nonprofits.
So I can
go
on this.
Yeah, why don't you,
I'll go
Go on,
in the
Senator
same
Gallion.
order that you did. I'm lining these up. So the amendment that is 113920, which has arbitrary in it. This amendment better defines what constitutes a quote unquote unreasonable requirement. As per the Attorney General's letter received by this committee, it defines that requirement as being clearly arbitrary and intended for no other legitimate purpose than to unduly burden the construction of the affordable housing project at issue. This amendment retains the protection against arbitrary bodies targeting certain projects, but ensures that those same bodies acting in good faith can provide important guidelines on issues such as parking, which if left unaddressed can create serious burden on the surrounding community. In other words, this amendment ensures that the legislation only prohibits those regulations that go beyond what is regular and reasonable and does not inadvertently hamstring the ability of local governments to create sensible development regulations.
Okay, so obviously a bill from the governor. So Brad, I think I've given you, I think you got sent Senator Gallion's package of amendments. I mean, I'd like essentially the sponsor of the bill, if you want to at least give us some feedback on administration's position on what you Senator Gallion's proffering.
Absolutely. And the issue had been raised and addressed in the chair's amendment. So I appreciate that. If you recall, when we did the briefing here, Maryland Association of Counties had mentioned this. We then took that offline, addressed that with MACO, and reached a compromise amendment that they said they're good with, we're good with, and the chair was kind enough to wrap that into his amendment. The language here was actually brought to council in-house for us. And they said that given the AG's letter and kind of the language that was used in there and the interpretation, this amendment actually exactly was contemplated as we were figuring out what MACO. And the advice I received from council was that this changes the section in that this AG's letter no longer would apply to it. The way that we structured it clarifies that it's in line with this letter exactly, but has the same intent, so that the letter here is still an active advice letter. So I think we're getting to the exact same thing you're looking to get at.
We're pretty close through the chair's amendments on that one. Okay, so we'll put this one aside then.
Thank you.
Let's see what next one. I'll tell you what, I'll just go to the order I have and make it a little easier. The next amendment is the historic one. So that is 103923. So this and this is what we all received, the request from the city of Havre de Grace. I think everybody was emailed that. So this is actually that requested amendment. And right now, the density of a qualified project may not exceed the density otherwise authorized in the district or zone located on. These are already in this. Agricultural land is one. Conservation property is another, and this would add within the boundaries of a historic district established by the U.S. Department of the Interior. If anybody has a question on what those districts look like, I have a breakdown by county here if anybody's interested in that. So like in Harford County, it'd be Bel Air Courthouse Historic District would be one. And the Havre de Grace Historic District would be another. It'd be any historic district by this National Register of Historic Places. So points on this: inserting high density housing into historic districts transforms its character. There is no infrastructure here to support middle housing, such as duplexes, triplexes, quadplexes, or cottage clusters. Our roads are small town roads, and we do not have the water sewer capacity for such intense development. So I definitely would like to, at the appropriate time, Mr. Chair, move this amendment.
Let's take these one at a time. Well, the questions, Vice Chair, and then again, I'm just obviously interested in the administration's position on some of these.
Oh,
But
well,
Vice-
the administration should go first.
Okay.
Oh, well, thank you.
I just had a question, either way.
Okay, Brad, why don't you lead
Yeah,
off,
Brad,
and then
you
we'll go
go.
to Vice Chair Kagan,
Yeah.
and then to Senator Lewis Young.
Okay, well, thank you very much again for the opportunity to respond. I had not seen this amendment, so I have no conception of what a historic district established here is exactly, whether that is a designation for preservation or whether that is just the entirety, say, of the city of Annapolis, which obviously has historic routes. Given that, I would respectfully request that we resist the amendment. Although Senator Gallion, I am very open to continuing this conversation with you in the interim. We have been working with historic commissions to make sure that we are protecting historic properties. It does say already that if you have, there is other state protections in law. So say that's what the historic preservations all are by nature, that this does not apply. So I think it's probably captured into the intent of historic areas, historic properties will not be redeveloped under this legislation. But this may end up cutting out huge swaths of the state. And so just without understanding the full impact of it, I'd respectfully request we reject the amendment.
With all due respect, I understand that position and, but I think I'd rather have that assurance and maybe, if we could find, supposing that this amendment were not to pass here, which I hope it does in this committee. If you change your position before it gets to the floor, if you had a chance to look into it some more, that would be terrific. But also just to remind the body, once whoever, whether it's a legislator, executive, when they bring a bill into us, it then becomes our possession. We're separate branches, co-equal branches of government. So if this is an amendment that us as a legislature thinks is going to improve the bill, I would encourage my colleagues here to look at it in that way, because we are the legislative branch, with all due respect.
Okay,
So that's where we are on that.
First of all, I agree with that statement. We get department bills obviously all the time from the administration or the various departments, but then sometimes we do ask the department if they agree or don't agree with an amendment. So I obviously I view this similar. Okay, let's just on this second issue, let's Vice Chair Kagan and then Senator Lewis Young, just on this second issue that Senator Gallion has brought up. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So my question, which is a little bit similar, but not exactly to what Brett Fallon just said. I did a search on historic district, and in this bill, it has 2 references to historic district commission, but it doesn't define what a historic district is. So you reference established by the Department of the Interior. I have historic buildings in my district, and I certainly wouldn't want high rises or a ton of townhouses put like right next door to it. But again, I would just be curious about distance, and I'd be interested in parameters, which I don't see in this bill unless you're able to explain that further.
I have the list of the properties.
Yeah.
So
It's the historic places. Now we have historic
Yeah.
places.
Oh, totally.
That's the list, right? That
Correct.
you're talking about?
But it's still, so while it wouldn't be, I'd be dubious about this because it doesn't seem to be defined enough, Senator Gallion.
Well, if you need more time, need to hold it.
I doubt that's gonna be an option, but the concept of your intent, I'm sympathetic, but I'm not sure this amendment is quite ready. for
And this
prime time.
was,
Can I also just say something to that too?
Sure.
About what you're talking about. I mean, there are districts that are kind of broad, but I also, this is really more targeted towards the historic places. You know what I'm saying? And I think that there is some preservation language in this bill as well. But like, yeah, this is that's a little bit different. This is like National Park Service type stuff, right? Because this is where it's coming from. That's the.
Let's just continue on this, on the Gallion, on this specific issue, and we'll move to other issues.
Yes.
Can I come and get it?
Senator Lewis Young, you want to weigh in on this, and we'll go to Senator Hester after that.
I have some real concerns also about this historic district amendment. Most of downtown Frederick is a historic district, and that's exactly where we want density because we have the infrastructure there. So I have a concern, but on the other hand, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, the MACO amendments give local jurisdictions the authority to make those calls. correct?
They do. So the adequate public facility ordinance section of the bill was removed in its entirety. So now every jurisdiction can outright deny a project. They can place whatever limitations or restrictions on it. The only standard set forth in the bill is that it be reasonable and as defined.
Thank you.
Okay, Sarah, additional questions just on this issue? Okay. Okay, I'll go back to you, Senator Gallen. You had additional amendments that we'll come back,
Sure.
potentially take votes on these, but I just want, let's go through and get the issues.
The next one ends with 125. This has to deal with, we had a discussion the other day. Now this, to jog everybody's memory, we didn't actually have a hearing on the House bill. We had a kind of a work group that day.
Well, actually, I think if
we
you look
worked
at,
through-
you'll see, we had a Senate Bill 484.
Right,
We
but the bill,
had a hearing.
but the bill's different.
Right, we're working off the House bill that came over.
Correct. So
We're
we
not-
didn't actually hear that House bill. It was more or less the work group took the place of that.
Yeah, that's true. And
So-
if you remember, Mr. Fallon came in and gave
Right,
us a
and-
briefing on what was coming from the House.
Correct.
Yeah,
And that
yeah,
wasn't recorded, I don't believe.
That's true.
So,
You're right.
I mean, maybe for the future, might want to look at that since we didn't have a House hearing. But this has to do with the manufactured homes and modular dwellings. Let's see. This would allow a governing body of the county to adopt a local law prohibiting the placements of a new manufactured home or modular dwellings referenced in the bill. The governing body of the county may adopt a local law stating the county opts out of provisions in the bill.
They start with you, Brad, and then we'll take questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Senator Gallion, for introducing that. This amendment removes the entire force of the bill. There's no bill. So I think that this is ultimately a yes or no vote for the bill.
Okay.
And so I respectfully would ask the committee restrict or resist.
And then
Okay,
the
Senator
final,
Gallion, back to you.
sure, the final is 327. And this is to deal with the nonprofits. This amendment closes a loophole by which a private developer may create an entity in which a nonprofit is a general partner, but not necessarily the controlling member, by ensuring that all entities who can access the benefits of this legislation are truly controlled by a nonprofit. We do this by specifying that only business structures in which a designated nonprofit has, quote, majority voting and management control, end quote, which means that they have control over all policy decisions, are eligible to access these provisions. This amendment protects nonprofits and their ability to steer their own development projects and prevents private for-profit developers from using nonprofits as a shield to gain undue access to these advantages that are meant solely for nonprofits.
Okay, Vice Chair Kagan, this sort of.
I am emailing Maryland nonprofits right this second to see what they think of this or if they're aware of it. I can't speak to this one quite yet.
Yeah, Brad, you want to?
Yeah, and thank you for that. This was, and Senator Guy, and I appreciate the intent here. We actually did make an amendment to the bill to address exactly this. We took two amendments. The first was introduced by the Maryland Association of Counties, which tightened the control of controlled by, or definition rather, controlled by. The second amendment requires that a 501c3 had to have existed for at least 3 years before they can be eligible for this section. And then lastly, I did send out to the whole committee a letter from the Maryland Association of CPAs who took a look at this. And I asked the exact question because I had a similar concern about whether this was going to create a loophole. They came back and said, Brad, the IRS has an interest in people paying taxes. We're pretty tough on this one. And they laid out the reasons why. So on this one, I think this, again, like the other one had been dealt with, but I appreciate the intent.
What about the part about the majority of voting and management control? Where is that, where you have to make sure these nonprofits have that majority?
I'll tell you, because it's the first time I've seen it, I'm not sure I completely understand how it compares on that front to the amendment. What I do have is legal opinions from CPAs who do 501c3 work to say that the concern that was raised here and the intention for it is addressed with the amendments.
Okay, and some of that, it doesn't, I'm not really talking about tax. I mean, we talk about tax law stuff here, but we're, that's not really what I was trying to get at here, but I don't know. I just think this tightens that up. I think this goes above and beyond what the current changes are. So I would also like to move this appropriate time.
Okay, let's just open up. We're going to go to Senator Brooks just for broad. We've heard essentially we had one amendment from the outset. We've had 3 amendments proffered by separate ideas, I guess, each from Senator Gallion. Let's go to, well, was it 3 or 4? Was it 4 separate ones or 3 concepts, as I recall? 4? You had 4. Yeah, so I was really thinking the historic issue, the modular dwelling issue, nonprofits. Okay. Okay, so Senator Brooks, you want to weigh in on any
thanks, Chair.
questions, comments?
Right, this is to the maker of the amendment. Now, you said you had concerns about the 501c3 operating as a for-profit or bringing in companies to shield. Yeah, would that not put that 501c3 in jeopardy of losing that status? And if they were to do that, then the IRS would come down on them extremely hard. So yeah, I think they would lose. Yeah, I don't think they would want to jeopardize losing that status. Yeah, bringing in trying to operate as a for-profit when that's totally against their charter and then the code.
Right. I don't believe so, but we're talking in kind of 2 ways here. So what the intent of the amendment is to deal with potential loopholes in development. And what we're hearing is, well, don't worry, this is, they're talking about tax loopholes. I'm not talking about tax loopholes. I'm worried about the loopholes in the development area. That's what I'm trying to address with this amendment, not the tax loophole.
If I may, Mr. Chair, and I apologize, Senator Gallion, if my response was or confusing on that. What I meant by that is there are tax implications of a result. Say an LLC, which we're all familiar with, somebody creating a subsidiary and then setting it up under another LLC. They're both for-profit entities, but it's a way to obfuscate or shield yourself from liability. The same is not true in this model. One is frankly because the greatest incentive and the motivating incentive for developers is profit. And so even if there was a way for them to shield behind, it removes the fundamental incentive from it. This component, I just don't know how this reflects to industry standards. I need to look at it, but I completely understand the concern raised, and I think that it's been addressed in the chair's amendment.
Okay, yes, Senator Brooks.
I might say, those 501c3s, they are restricted from distributing profits to individuals or entities, and those funds got to be used for charitable and religious and educational and scientific purposes only. So.
Okay,
Thanks, Chair.
Any other questions for our discussion? What we do have in front of us, so we had the initial amendments, which, at least according to Mr. Fallon, take into account the first issue that was, I believe, raised by Senator Gallion, a legitimate issue. So I'd like to at least take up that first amendment, then we'll go through the 3 other issues raised by Senator Gallion, if that's a fair way to deal with this. So does anybody want to move at least on the initial amendments from the chair?
Second.
Okay, Vice Chair Kagan, favorable, second from Senator Augustine. Discussion on those amendments. Okay, I want to do this because this is an important bill. I want to let's go through, let's do a roll call on all these issues. And I think it's important. So we have a favorable, second on the chair's amendments. And Memorial, let's just go around the horn and do a roll call on each of these items.
Senator Kagan.
Aye.
Senator Kagan, yes. Senator Augustine.
Okay.
Senator Augustine, yes. Senator Gallion. Senator Gallion, yes. Senator Watson. Senator Watson, yes. Senator Lewis Young.
Yeah.
Senator Lewis Young, yes. Senator Brooks.
Yes.
Senator Brooks, yes. Senator Carozza.
Yes.
Senator Carozza, yes. Senator Hester.
Yeah.
Senator Hester, yes. Senator Washington.
Yes.
Senator Washington, yes. Senator Simonaire. Senator Simonaire, yes. And Senator Feldman.
Okay, yes, those amendments carry. Now let's go to the Gallion amendments. I just want to make clear exactly, let's start with the first one. After that first issue you raised had to do with the historic areas. And so what amendment, just so we're clear, the number of that amendment?
The number is 103-923/1.
Okay, and why don't you just reiterate, you obviously got some pushback, from
Right.
a couple of members, but just
So
just
already.
rehash at least what we're voting
Sure.
on. Everybody understands it.
Already in the bill, the density of a qualified project may not exceed the density otherwise authorized in a district or zone located on agricultural land or conservation property. And this adds another line, which would be within the boundaries of a historic district established by the U.S. Department of the Interior. So I'd like to move that amendment.
Okay, there is a motion and a second. You heard some of the discussion. Let's have some further discussion. We obviously, Vice Chair Kagan, Senator Augustine and Senator Lewis had some reservations. Vice Chair Kagan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to speak against the amendment. I looked at the list and thank you, Senator Gallion, for sharing the list. In addition to the town of Garrett Park, the whole town of Garrett Park, about 1,000 people that I used to represent before redistricting 100 years ago, was on the list. The town of Kensington, the whole town of Kensington is on there. And I'll give you just one other example, which is West Montgomery Avenue in Rockville. And West Montgomery Avenue is where Chestnut Hill Lodge, which is a historic place, became a whole community. And Chestnut Lodge is a beautiful community with townhouses and single family homes and all that. And so I think it's too broad, but as I said earlier, I think it's well intentioned. I'll be voting no on the amendment.
Further discussion? We've got Senator Watts would like to weigh in.
Just real quick, the historic district would only be included if they are in the proper proximity of a TOD area, right?
No, yeah, this would cut it out. As I understand it, this would cut it out entirely from the bill. So there are the TOD section, there's the 501c3 nonprofits, and then there's the formerly state-owned campuses and complexes, 10 of which are in the state. So this would apply to all three. Of those mentioned, I'm not sure that any are actually already captured in the TOD.
So I'm missing something. So I thought the bill literally dealt with TOD areas and then state-owned property, right?
Those are the two anchor sites, and then properties owned by a 501c3 nonprofit as defined that have existed for at least 3 years and have 25% affordable housing units at 60% AMI.
Okay, so right now in the current bill, historic districts aren't referenced at all.
They're referenced only through, not explicit through reference, that if the state has another protection against developing on, and that applies not just to historic districts, it applies also to areas with, say, an environmental easement or agricultural land preservation, that they are not applicable in this bill.
Thanks.
And Senator Lewis Young, just on this amendment.
Yes, historic districts. I mentioned one of my concerns is that's where infrastructure is in the high density areas, which is typically historic districts. And I was thinking through that as the conversation continued, not only Frederick, but a few other municipalities in my county that are very historic in nature. But that's exactly where public transit is as well, in or near historic districts. And you want affordable housing to be as close to public transit as possible. And typically that's in historic districts in urban areas. So I could not vote for this amendment. Thank you.
Okay, Senator Hester.
So as this committee knows, I really focused on these formerly state-owned complexes for like 5 or 6 years. And I just can't tell, whether or not the Sykesville Historic District includes, the former Springfield Hospital. And like there you've got 16 empty buildings, which are like ripe for mixed use, which would include like high density plus commercial. And so with all due respect to the senator, I'm going to be voting no as well.
Okay, why don't we take a vote on this amendment from Senator Gallion and Lamoria? We're going to do a roll call. Okay.
All right. Senator Kagan.
I'm sorry, on the amendment.
Yes.
On the amendment,
No.
on the first, the amendment from Senator Gallion.
Yes,
Yep.
well-intentioned amendment, no.
Senator Kagan, no. Senator Augustine. Senator Augustine, no. Senator Gallion.
Yes.
Senator Gallion, yes. Senator Watson. Senator Watson, no. Senator Lewis Young.
No.
Senator Lewis Young, no. Senator Brooks. Senator Brooks, no. Senator Carozza. Senator Carozza, yes. Senator Hester. Senator Hester, no. Senator Washington. Senator Washington, no. Senator Simoneri is a yes. Senator Feldman.
Okay, that's a no. So that motion fails on a 3-8 vote. We'll next take up the modular dwelling issue, which at least from the administration's point of view is a de facto yes or no on the bill. But that said, are you proffering it? And if so, are you moving favorable or what are you doing? It's up to you. Okay, so let's go to the bill, the amendment, and give us the number again on the nonprofits /
Sure, that is 373327/1. And that makes sure that they already it's looking to tighten it up even farther, make sure there's no loopholes. One thing I just wanted to add to that, nonprofits aren't necessarily the ones getting the profits. A structure can be set up where for-profits are entitled to the profits, but the nonprofits have policy control. So to me, this just really makes sure this piece of legislation is airtight. So I'd like to move this amendment.
Okay, we have a favorable motion on that amendment from Senator Gallion. Is there a second? Okay, a second from Senator Carozza. Discussion, Senator Augustine.
Thank you. The thing is, I too wanted to make sure that this area was tight, and it is now. I mean, it was made tight with conversations with Mako. It was made tight with the CPAs. And the thing is that there are nonprofit entities out there who would have a greater interest in creating affordable housing. Let's go back to what this bill is supposed to be about. I mean, this bill is about our housing crisis and the fact that we need more affordable housing. A nonprofit, their goal is not exclusively to make money. I mean, they have a larger purpose in mind, which would include and can include things like helping to create affordable housing, which I think that's the reason why I think it's very appropriate that they be one of the groups that really does that for us. And then that protection that we have in there, the 3-year protection is a very good protection. I think that it's already been thoughtfully done. It's been worked out with all of the stakeholders. And so I'm just going to vote no on this amendment.
Anybody else want to weigh in on this amendment before we do a roll call? Okay. That said, Lamouria, we're going to take a roll call on the Gallion amendment that was just discussed. Okay.
All right, Senator Kagan.
No.
Senator Kagan, no. Senator Augustine.
No.
Senator Augustine, no. Senator Gallion.
Yeah.
Senator Gallion, yes. Senator Watson.
No.
Senator Watson, no. Senator Lewis Young.
No.
Senator Lewis Young, no. Senator Brooks.
No.
Senator Brooks, no. Senator Carozza.
Yes.
Senator Carozza, yes. Senator Hester.
No.
Senator Hester, no. Senator Washington.
No.
Senator Washington, no. Senator Simoneri.
Yeah.
Senator Simoneri, yes. And Senator Feldman.
Oh, no, that motion fails 3-8, which brings us to the bill with the amendment. Okay, we've got Senator Augustine has moved favorable on the bill as amended, a second from the vice chair. We are on House Bill 538 as amended. We have a motion and a second. We're going to do a roll call.
All right, Senator Kagan.
Before I vote, can I just say thank you to Brad Fallon, to the whole team, to the governor's folks for all the hard work, for checking in with all of us, for your wisdom and flexibility and just patience in all of it.
Sure.
So thank you. Proud to vote yes.
I'll stop bugging you all now.
Sorry?
I'll stop bugging you all now.
Amen. I'll vote yes twice on that then.
All right, Senator Kagan is yes. Senator Augustine.
Yes.
Senator Augustine, yes. Senator Gallion.
But first off, thank you for the deference or allow us to discuss different amendments and all. I did feel like they would have strengthened it, but ultimately my concern with this bill lies in local authority and local control. And I feel like this definitely does infringe on that. I mean, nobody knows their local areas more than the folks that run those and live in those towns and counties. I understand the need for more affordable housing, but I believe it was a testimony from one of the commissioners in Howard County, I think summed it up best when the real reason that people are having a hard time affording housing is because they're having a hard time affording a lot of things because of where we are with inflation. You know, there we have a lot of people struggling economically. So I think if our citizens start doing a little better financially, that would help more than anything. So with that, I'll be voting no. Thank you.
All right, Senator Gallion, no. Senator Watson.
Just quickly to explain my vote. You know, we've had a lot of discussions about this, and this is something very sensitive. And as we talk about affordable housing, I have not met one homeowner who doesn't want their house to increase in value. And, you know, it's kind of weighing this thing between what's affordable and what's not. But I do appreciate, you know, the back and forth we've had to work out some of the issues that I thought were unique to Prince George's County. So I vote aye, Mr. Chair.
All right, Senator Watson is a yes. Senator Lewis Young.
Yes.
Senator Lewis Young, yes. Senator Brooks.
Yes.
Senator Brooks, yes. Senator Carozza.
Now to explain my vote.
It would be based on the concerns at the local level.
All right. Senator Carozza, no. Senator Hester.
Is this on the bill?
Yes.
Yes. Tired.
All right, Senator Hester, yes. Senator Washington.
Yes.
Senator Washington, yes. Senator Simon.
No.
Senator Simon, no. Senator Feldman.
Yes, that bill carries. Next up, thank you, Brad. Thank you for coming in here.
Mr. Chair, I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
Shamari did come back and say that he accidentally gave a wrong answer on 693. Is it appropriate? He asked me if I could relay
Sure,
it.
yeah, you sent me a note here and I think, in the
Okay,
interest of
I'm
full
sorry.
disclosure. No, go on, tell there was one in the back and
So to
forth.
your question, right now, apparently in the reprint, they did not include the block of the pass through. That's going to be introduced as a floor amendment. Apparently it was worked out outside of discussions with me. So I thought it was in the reprint. We fully endorse that, but it will be coming up on the Senate floor. And he said he voted. I'm sorry, on House. Sorry, we talked about a lot.
On this bill and the prior bill.
On House Bill 693, on the prior bill, you had asked whether the eviction filing fee is recoverable. So if the landlord pays it, whether they can get the money back from the tenant. As the bill written right now, no. I thought that it was in there already because that's how it had been discussed, but I hadn't seen the final reprint. Evidently, that is being added on the floor through an arrangement that had been determined. So I fully endorse it, but he just came and told me that, so I felt that I needed to.
But not from this committee, obviously, the other committee, correct? We're second.
So apologies, I give you bad information before.
Okay, guys, we had, if you recall, we had two bills we moved to the end of the calendar. So if we could go back to starting with House Bill 700. And Stacy, just if you could just refresh everybody's memory, it's been a while since we were back on these two bills. House Bill 700.
Right.
Why don't you just tell everybody, refresh everybody's memory, we have two bills that we put to the end.
Sure.
Let's go back.
House Bill 700 Election Law, Election Judges Revisions. The bill defines returning election judge for purposes of the existing additional compensation provided to returning election judges. The bill's term of office for the bill authorizes a public school student who serves as an election judge to both earn service learning credits and receive compensation. And the bill requires that a county employee who serves as an election judge during the hours that the employee is scheduled to work receives administrative leave and election judge compensation. The bill also requires the State Board of Elections to adopt regulations to standardize and minimize specified forms of documentation required of election judges. If you recall, the amendments are on the back page of your packet, which is page 73. And the amendments that were offered require the state board to implement versus provide to local boards an election judge recruitment marketing campaign. And local boards are authorized to supplement that state board developed marketing campaign. It clarifies provisions regarding who's considered a returning election judge, and it strikes the provisions regarding public school students and service credit hours.
If I recall, Senator Kagan had some questions. It was an and, an or, and I'm going to yield to the vice chair.
And thank you for the time to do some checking in on folks. So everything I said almost everything I said was accurate in terms of the concepts of yes and of SSL and pay being a good concept. Unfortunately, it really doesn't work in this instance. And again, the Maryland State Department of Education is a little worried about a slippery slope, and that's why they don't want this as a precedent. And so I am going to move favorable on the amendments Stacy described, even though that is not the preferred version from many advocates and the sponsor of the House bill, but that is the good policy, I regret to say. So our young people will still be recruited to be election judges, and they will still be allowed to choose between service learning hours or being paid. Those options will be.
Okay, it was second from Senator Augustine. All in favor of this amendment, raise your hand. All opposed? That amendment carries. We now have House Bill 700 as amended before us. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Favorable motion from Vice Chair, second from Senator Augustine. Questions, discussion? Yes, we're going to go to Senator Carozza.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Before we vote, and going back to the process of the state, the locals, what the locals have to do to implement. I mean, I know it's back up to the state board to develop and implement, but what is it that what is the interaction then between the locals and these recruitment of judges, that especially with the students that are going to have the option of the community service hours or to be paid?
Vice Chair.
Yeah, Senator Carozza, nothing about this bill changes any of that. It's not about recruitment. It's clarifying and then when it comes to the students, as you said, that just keeps status quo in effect of they can either get service learning hours or they can get paid the same as any other judge, but they cannot do both.
Right. I guess what my question is, how does this work? Like, I'm thinking, and I have not had the opportunity since the bill came up and we held it for a little bit. Like, let's take Worcester County. What the Worcester County election board's director, what is her role in kind of, I guess, managing the students when it comes to their involvement as election judges?
So local boards are responsible for hiring all of the election judges during an election for their county. And that includes previously the marketing campaign to recruit new election judges. This amendment would say that the state board is responsible for implementing the marketing campaign, but it doesn't change the responsibility of the locals in actually hiring the individuals to come. So students can apply through your local board. You can apply through the state board to be an election judge, and they will send you to the correct local board in the county in which they reside, but they're still responsible for hiring them.
They being the
local board, yes.
Vice Chair Kagan, you've got your light on?
Nope. Oh.
Okay, so we had a motion and a second favorable on the amendments. Discussion? Okay, all in favor of the amendments? Oh, I apologize, Senator Gallion.
So I just had a question, like on page 2 of the bill regarding, so this adds in where county, so right now already a state employee can get the administrative leave, but now county employees will be able to?
Correct.
So how's that like administrative leave? Is that like they get like vacation time later or something to make up for that? How or they get paid? It's like under personal leave. How does that work?
So for example, in legislative services where I work, we get, if you decide to be an election judge, you hand in a form, and then instead of it being charged against your personal leave or your paid vacation time, you get considered administrative leave, meaning leave granted by the administration. And so you get paid for your 8 hours.
Okay.
Well, that's by the local board. DLS does not pay me.
Right.
Yes, yes.
So-
The local board, yes. You do get compensated for your
work, right?
training and for the day that you show up to provide the services.
I understand we need these judges, but and I'm gonna, vote for the bill, but I just want to put this out there. So if you are a government employee, whether it be state or county, you're gonna get this leave to go do this, which is fine. But if you're in the private sector and want to go be a judge, you probably got to pay somebody extra to cover for you when you're going and doing this. I just want to put that out there.
Anybody else want to weigh in on this? Did we already adopt the amendments? Okay, and we had a motion in a second. Okay, well, let's first take up the amendments. Okay, but yes, Senator Washington.
So I just wanted to understand Senator Gallian's point. Do you want us to mandate that private sector allow individuals to be able to take with pay to participate? I mean, because that would solve the problem and maximize participation. I agree. Oh, okay, all right then.
Okay, okay, we had a motion and second on the amendments. Okay, well, seems there's some discussion. We're just on the amendments, just on the amendments. Okay, all in favor of the amendments, raise your hand. All opposed, the amendments carry. We've got House Bill 770 as amended in front of us. Discussion, motions, favorable or unfavorable. Okay, Senator Lewis Young.
Yeah, this whole conversation about the private sector, I think it's unnecessary to mandate because I've never heard of a private sector business, large, medium, or small, that didn't have vacation days, personal days, whatever, that accommodates this kind of thing.
For Senator Gallion.
A lot of businesses only have 1 or 2 employees. So for instance, when I'm down here, I'm paying somebody to cover for me when I'm gone Tuesday through Friday. So that happens in a lot. Not all businesses are 5, 10, 20 people, small business. There's some that are only 1 or 2.
Got a favorable motion from, as amended on House Bill 700 from Senator Augustine, second from the Vice Chair. Let's do a roll call on this one, given the discussion.
All right, Senator Kagan? Aye. Senator Kagan, yes. Senator Augustine?
Yes.
Senator Augustine, yes. Senator Gallion? Yes. Senator Gallion, yes. Senator Watson? Senator Watson, yes. Senator Lewis Young? Yes. Senator Lewis Young, yes. Senator Brooks?
Yes.
Senator Brooks, yes. Senator Carozza?
Yeah, qualification that once I hear back from my locals, that may turn to yes.
Senator Hester? I'm sorry, Senator Carozza, no. Senator Hester? Senator Hester, yes. Senator Washington? Yes. Senator Washington, yes. Senator Simoneau? Senator Simoneau, yes. Senator Feldman?
Yes, bill carries 10-1, which brings us to our final bill. The second bill that we bumped, and Senator Carozza was asking some questions, and we moved to take care of the other business. House Bill 991. And Dara, just again, to refresh everybody's memory, this will be the last bill we deal with today. We have to go to the floor in about 10 minutes. So just refresh everybody's memory about House Bill 991 from Delegate Love. And we had a cross file Senate Bill 1074. So just refresh everybody's memory.
So House Bill 991, agriculture, food processing residuals, utilization permit establishment. The bill establishes a regulatory program in the Department of the Environment, Department of Agriculture related to the utilization of food processing residuals. The bill requires a person to obtain a permit from the department before the person may utilize food processing residuals in the state and establishes related requirements and enforcing provisions. The department must set reasonable fees to cover the department's costs of administering the program, which are held in a newly established food processing residuals administration fund. The bill also authorizes the department to administer a certification program for individuals who haul food processing residuals. There's an amendment from the sponsor, which makes various technical changes and removes language relating to hauling routes. It also authorizes regulations adopted by the department to carry out the bill to include acceptable nutrient application rates, including rates for nitrogen, phosphorus, and heavy metals, consistent with recommendations published or accepted by the Department for Nutrient Management.
Okay, so we passed the Senate bill, just going back to Senator Gallion, had some questions. From that. So we passed the Senate bill. This amendment from the sponsor on the House side broaden some component part of this, as I recall the back and forth?
So the question was in relation to when the department may or may not issue a permit under the program, and it changed the language, the Senate bill had changed the language of when the department may not issue a permit from what's in House Bill 991. House Bill 991 says a permit may not be issued if there's a risk of harm to the environment or public health or safety. The amendments to the Senate bill had a more prescriptive standard.
Okay. So when we broke, yes, Senator Gallion, then Senator Carozza, I think, was in the process of asking some asking some questions when we moved on. So let's go back to you, Senator Gallion, then we'll go back to Senator Carozza. Because she had questions. Yes, Senator Gallion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, I'm going to support this bill, but I liked it a little better the way we had it originally, but I understand that the bill sponsors have worked things out with different groups. So, but with that, I would like to just get on the record. My only concern with this legislation is when you're talking about a definition of public health, safety, and welfare. I think that's maybe up for some interpretation. It'll have to be left up to, I guess, to be worked out in regulations or whatnot. So maybe in the future, we can kind of look at that and tighten that up and get a really good definition in the books for this. But that's my only kind of reservation on this. But I talked with the sponsor and I'd like to keep this thing moving. So I'll maybe a little reluctantly be voting yes on this.
Okay, well, first we have an amendment that we need to take up, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, any other questions before we take up that amendment? Okay, is somebody move the amendment? Senator Lewis Young, a second from Senator Augustine. Okay, all in favor of that amendment, raise your hand. All opposed? Okay, the amendment carries. We now have our final bill for today in front of us, House Bill 991 as amended. Is there an motion on the bill, favorable on the bill as amended? Looking for a favorable. Senator Hester, favorable, second from Senator Augustine. All in favor, House Bill 991 as amended, raise your hand. All opposed? Yeah, okay, we got one no vote. So it's a 10-1 yes vote. It carries with one vote no from Senator Simon Ayer. And that is the work for today. And we will see you on the floor in 10 minutes or thereabouts.